The fate of Velika Novoselka has been decided. Not everyone managed to escape. The Russian armed forces are racing toward the Dnipro. Good day, dear friends. As always, we continue to analyze the situation on the front line daily. Right now, the Russian command's plan for the next phase of actions is becoming apparent. The storming of cities like Chasiv Yar and Toretsk is nearing its conclusion, and the names of the next cities where battles will unfold are already known. This isn't just a theoretical assumption, it's evident from practical steps being taken. For example, Russian forces are currently advancing toward the cities of Lyman and Kupiansk. Today, we will discuss this in detail, as well as other significant developments. Let's dive into the events by pulling up the map. Yesterday was rich in events across various sections of the front. Within just one day, 2 villages came under Russian control, and Ukraine lost 17 square kilometers of territory, which is now under the control of the Russian army. Let's start from the north, in the Kharkiv region. The village in question is Zapadne. The Ukrainian map has not yet been updated, but this village has fallen under Russian control, as confirmed by multiple sources, including Ukrainian ones. This development is significant for 3 reasons. First, the village is located on elevated terrain compared to the surrounding area. Now that the Russian army has secured this height, they can maintain fire control over the adjacent territory. Second, with the capture of Zapadne, the Russian army has significantly expanded its foothold on the right bank of the Oskil River. The entire area, including Dvorichne, the territory between Dvorichne and Zapadne itself, is under Russian control. Dislodging the Russian army from such a significant foothold, especially given the dominant elevation, will be extremely challenging for Ukrainian forces. Reports indicate that Ukraine is currently amassing equipment and resources in the Kharkiv region for counter-offensive actions to prevent the Russian army from advancing toward Kupiansk. The third key point concerns Kupiansk. Take a look at the R79 highway leading from Zapadne to Kondrashivka and from Kondrashivka to Kupiansk, specifically the right bank part of the city. Zapadne is only 9 kilometers from Kupiansk. The right bank part of Kupiansk is significantly higher than the left bank part. Thus, the capture of Kupiansk would focus on the right bank area, as holding the left bank would become untenable if the right bank is under enemy control. A similar situation occurred in November when Russian forces entered the left bank part of Kupiansk, but couldn't hold it due to heavy fire from the higher right bank positions. The same dynamic would apply if Russian forces break through to the right bank part of Kupiansk from Kondrashivka. The Ukrainian forces would likely retreat from the left bank. That's the news from the Kharkiv region. Let's move on, as there are plenty of other significant updates. For example, Russian forces are making breakthroughs toward Lyman and have already achieved certain successes. Now, regarding Lyman, here's the situation. After Russian forces crossed the Jerebets River and secured positions on the right bank, capturing the settlement of Ivanivka, they expanded their zone of control. Ukrainian forces attempted counterattacks but were unsuccessful. As a result, Russian forces took control of the heights near Ivanivka and began advancing further, specifically toward the settlement of Kolodiazi. The distance between Ivanivka and Kolodiazi is about 4.5 kilometers, which has now effectively been covered. Just a day ago, we discussed how Russian positions were 700 meters from the village. Yesterday, reports from Ukrainian sources indicated that Russian assault units had entered the northeastern outskirts of Kolodiazi, allegedly destroying all opposition. Thus, it's safe to say that battles for the village have officially begun. Why is this important? Look at the map. Here's Kolodiazi, and further south is the city of Lyman. The distance between them is about 10 kilometers. True, there are open fields between Kolodiazi and Lyman, with just one small settlement, Stavki. Once Kolodiazi is captured, Russian forces will have a 10-kilometer operational expanse that they can cover quickly. By spring, we'll likely be discussing reports of battles for the city of Lyman. Let's move on to more developments, specifically in Chasiv Yar, or rather on its southern flank. Here, Russian forces have advanced by about 1 kilometer, reaching the largest Ukrainian stronghold known as Bunker. Why hasn't this 3 square kilometer area come under Russian control yet? It's precisely because of this major stronghold. Let me zoom in on it for you. Yesterday, Russian forces reached this position, and if Ukrainian forces are pushed out in the next couple of days, the entire area south of Chasiv Yar will come under Russian control. This will lead to a swift assault on Shevchenko and plant number 2, which will in turn seal the fate of the Ukrainian garrison in Chasiv Yar. Their position there is dire. As we've previously discussed, they're now trapped in the central districts with no real escape routes. All supply lines have been cut, leaving only a small crossing over a water body, which is extremely narrow, inconvenient, and under fire control by Russian forces. Now, moving on to Toretsk, or more specifically, the Toretsk mine, there are no significant changes. Fighting continues, but minor advances have been reported on the flanks. For instance, here, Russian forces have taken 2 more streets in Novospaska. Beyond that, we come to the second village that came under Russian control yesterday, Baranivka, on the eastern flank of the Pokrovsk agglomeration. While the Ukrainian map hasn't yet been updated, it typically takes a day or two. You can already see that the village is encircled. Yesterday, Russian forces launched a 2-pronged attack, driving out Ukrainian troops and capturing the village. Is this a significant event, or just a routine development? It's undoubtedly significant, and here's why. The advance will continue toward Zeleny High. That's the immediate target, but the ultimate objective is to link up with Russian units near Toretsk. When that happens, this entire area will be encircled, forming a cauldron. You can call it a blockade, encirclement, or whatever term you prefer, but the result is the same. We often talk about cauldrons, but they're usually small, spanning a few square kilometers. Rarely do they cover dozens of square kilometers, like the 36-square-kilometer cauldron near Kurakov right now. However, that will pale in comparison to this situation, where the encirclement will cover an area of over 200 square kilometers. Even the Debaltsev cauldron seems small by comparison. On the western flank of Pokrovsk, the assault on Udakny continues. Russian forces are also advancing along the settlement, gaining nearly 2 kilometers south of Udakny yesterday. This means that only about 5 kilometers remain to reach the border with Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. Let's measure it. Yes, it's just under 5 kilometers. Moving further, significant progress was made by Russian forces yesterday in this section, spanning the line from Slavyanka to Petropavlivka. The primary target here is the road between Yaseneve and Andriivka. Yesterday, Russian forces advanced about 2 kilometers. Only 2 more kilometers remain before they can storm Andriivka. Once this stretch is cleared, from Slavyanka and Petropavlivka, the assault on Andriivka will begin, allowing Russian forces to attack from 2 sides. Further south, we see what was initially a semi-cauldron, but has now become more than that. Yesterday, we analyzed this in detail, and you can revisit our previous discussion. The total encircled area now spans about 40 square kilometers. Ukrainian forces urgently need to retreat, but even that won't be painless anymore, as the only remaining road is under complete fire control. Meanwhile, the zone of Russian control around Velika Novoselka continues to expand, and the mood among Ukrainian forces grows increasingly grim. This is evident from their telegram posts, where they anticipate that the situation here will be resolved soon, certainly by the end of the month, because they simply lack the strength to hold Velika Novoselka. Beyond the Oskil River, what capturing Zapadne means for the Russian armed forces. Our units, 25th Motorized Rifle Brigade, continue to expand the foothold on the western bank of the Oskil River, north of Kupiansk. Yesterday evening, reports indicated, and today the Russian Ministry of Defense officially confirmed, that the village of Zapadne has come under Russian control. I've been talking about it for a long time as one of the priority targets for the Russian armed forces in this area. Once a relatively stable foothold was established on the right bank of the Oskil River, control over the settlement of Zapadne and the nearby heights became key. This control allows us to shield the crossing points, several of which are needed for a strategic offensive, from precise ATGM fire and small arms attacks. This forces the enemy to rely on artillery and HIMARS, which is far riskier for them, and, sooner or later, leads to the suppression of their launchers and batteries. In short, it's now a two-way game. Only control over Zapadne can prevent such risks. Additionally, taking control of the heights around Zapadne allows the Russian armed forces drone operators to significantly extend the range of drone operations in this sector. This will immediately impact the supply chains of opposing Ukrainian units. The same approach now needs to be applied north of the lower Dvorichna River. This means taking control of the settlements of Dolhinka, Novomlinsk, and Fiholivka. Once this is accomplished, the Russian armed forces' foothold in this area will become truly strategic, allowing for even large-scale offensive operations to be launched from there. Judging by the actions of the Russian armed forces, this is precisely the direction they are moving in. That's all for the current situation on the front. I wish you all a good working day.